Woohoo! Did I scare you? Love a good thrill.
Choose me. I'm like a morning coffee, but for your entire day. Choose me. Tanya felt another wave of excitement wash over her by Fan's words. Tanya moved one of her hands from Fan to rub his head. Tanya spoke in a seductive and dominant tone, although her tone had a hint of kindness to it. Tanya, oh? You won't? That's so good to hear. Tanya was shocked when Fan mentioned that Mary actually tried to make him pay her money for his powers. Tanya continued to rub Fan's head as she began to speak once again. Tanya's tone had suddenly become very seductive and she had a grin on her face. Tanya, $5? Really? Tanya was even more shocked after hearing this. How desperate was Mary? Did she really believe she could scam Fan for $5? The very idea was humiliating for Tanya to even think about. Tanya continued to rub Fan's head, speaking in a seductive tone once again. Tanya, of course it's fake. Tanya felt beyond infuriated by Fan's confession. The fact that Mary was able to manipulate Fan for even a second enraged Tanya. Tanya suddenly grabbed hold of Fan's chin and forced him look directly at her. Tanya, you believed it? You believed that Mary's scam was legit? Tanya's tone was seductive and dominant once more, as she responded, Tanya. Fan, you cannot just buy things because they promise power. That's dangerous. Tanya slowly ran her fingers through Fan's hair. The act was almost loving. Tanya felt almost frustrated as Fan tried to justify buying the fake powers. Tanya was still holding Fan's chin. She spoke with a stern but seductive tone. Fan, next time this happens, you need to consult me before buying anything. Tanya's cheeks went pink when Fan referred to her as Dear Lieutenant. Hearing that from him made the possessive hunger in Tanya grow even more. Tanya responded to Fan in a seductive and dominant tone, also calling him honey. Tanya, good, because next time you might buy something fake, or harmful, honey. Tanya couldn't help but smirk at Fan's words. Her psychopath was a term that Tanya had long gotten used to, but when Fan referred to her as his God, it felt so right and good. Tanya slowly began to rub Fan's head. She loved being able to have him directly below her, kneeling in front of her like a pet. Tanya spoke in a seductive tone. She called Fan darling. Tanya, I'm your psychopath. Tanya continued to gently rub Fan's head. She loved how he listed the different words that could describe her, all the negative words that described her personality, and yet Fan still seemed to love her. Tanya felt a deep lust for Fan, and a possessive desire to have him all for herself. Tanya bent down and spoke directly into Fan's ear, speaking in a seductive tone of voice. Tanya, you really do know all the right words to describe me, honey. Tanya couldn't even argue against Fan's words. Tanya slowly wrapped her arms around Fan and pulled him into a deep embrace. Tanya was feeling a lot of possessiveness toward Fan. She now wanted to make him know that she was his and his alone. Tanya spoke into Fan's ear. Her tone was seductive and possessive. Tanya. Yes, I'm a remorseless, evil, psychopathic, and egomaniacal. Tanya gently ran her fingers through Fan's hair as she spoke in a soft, seductive tone directly into his ear. Tanya. Tanya found it interesting when Fan mentioned high-functioning psychopathy, but she decided not to dwell on it for long. Tanya continued to hold Fan in their embrace. She gently rubbed his head as she responded to Fan Tanya. Well, I was formally diagnosed when I was 17, and I was diagnosed with both sociopathy and high-functioning psychopathy. Tanya couldn't even deny the statement. It was true. Tanya leaned to the side and rested her head against Fan's. She was beginning to feel more relaxed as they sat down together and talked like this. Tanya spoke softly as she leaned against him. Very true. Tanya suddenly felt like asking Fan a question. She spoke up. Her tone was soft and kind. Tanya, why are you so interested in learning about psychological conditions, honey? Tanya gently rubbed Fan's head, feeling his silky smooth hair. She had a smirk on her face when Fan said that he would be her personal assistant and healer. She loved the sound of being called that. It almost felt like Tanya owned him now. Tanya spoke to Fan as she continued to gently rub his head. Tanya, good. Tanya suddenly hugged Fan tighter, pulling him closer to her. Tanya immediately let go of Fan when Victoria interrupted them. Tanya looked concerned when she saw Victoria. She spoke with urgency in her tone. Tanya, Victoria, what's the emergency? Tanya was furious when Victoria told of the scam that Mary had pulled. Tanya clenched her fist in anger at the thought of Mary doing such a thing, but the thought of her putting sleepings in someone's food made Tanya even more mad. Tanya gripped Victoria's shoulders. Her expression was intense as she spoke to Victoria. Tanya, where is this soldier who was drugged? Tanya let go of Victoria and turned, before walking quickly over to the soldier that had been drugged. Tanya looked down at him and noticed that Victoria was correct. He was definitely drugged. He was barely conscious. Tanya kneeled down next to the drugged soldier and looked back at Victoria. Tanya, what kind of drug was given to him, Victoria? Tanya frowned as she turned back to the drugged soldier. She looked him over and realized that he was hardly conscious and very vulnerable. Tanya knew that Mary was truly evil if she was willing to go this far. Tanya spoke in an urgent tone to Victoria. Tanya, how long has he been like this, Victoria? Tanya suddenly felt horrified when Victoria said that the soldier had been unconscious for 7 hours. Tanya could hardly believe it. That bitch was more dangerous than she thought. Tanya spoke in an urgent and furious tone as she stood up straight, looking directly at Victoria. Tanya, get medical assistance for him. Right. Now? Tanya nodded to Victoria, still furious as she watched Victoria hurry away to get the healer soldiers. Tanya kept her eyes on Victoria until she was gone, before turning and looking back at the drugged soldier's unconscious body. Tanya clenched her fist as she looked at the drugged soldier. Tanya was furious at seeing this soldier in such a defenseless state. Tanya turned after hearing Fan's voice. She had almost forgotten that he was here. Tanya was still very much in protective mode, and when she turned to look at Fan, she suddenly realized that she must look quite angry. Tanya was silent for a moment as she stared at Fan before forcing herself to calm down a little, her tone becoming slightly gentle as she spoke. Tanya. I'm fine, honey. It's just that bastard Mary put sleeping pills in one our soldiers. Tanya was a little surprised when she saw Fan suddenly get angry. Very angry. Tanya had never seen Fan so upset before. It was a little frightening. Tanya slowly walked over to Fan. She gently placed a hand on his shoulder and spoke softly as she tried to calm him down. "Honey, calm down." Tanya looked a little sympathetic when Fan spoke. Tanya understood his anger. She felt equally as angry after knowing what Mary did to their soldier. "Tanya, honey, I know you're angry, so am I." Tanya slowly moved to stand directly in front of Fan. She placed her hands on his shoulders and looked directly at him in the eye, speaking to him softly. "Tanya, but you need to calm yourself." Tanya smiled as Fan agreed to calm down. She knew how bad Fan's anger could become, and didn't want that to happen right now. Tanya gently rubbed Fan's shoulders as she spoke. "Tanya, good." Tanya then spoke in a more serious tone. "Tanya, we will stop Mary someday, but we have to do it together." Tanya turned her head to look when one of the soldiers called to her. She spoke in a tone of professionalism. Tanya began to become irritated as the soldier kept saying there was soup. "Tanya, what do you mean there's still soup? Where are you right now?" Tanya was now completely and visibly frustrated by the soldier. She yelled back in anger. "Tanya, what do you mean you're at soup? Say something that makes sense." Tanya paused for a moment before realizing, oh, now it makes sense. They were at soup? Tanya took a deep breath and spoke again, regaining her composure. Tanya, the enemies are at soup. Tanya suddenly realized that her anger wasn't necessary at the moment. She responded to the soldier. Her tone was calm. Tanya, I see, and what kind of soup are they eating? Tanya paused before responding, confused by the soldier's answer. Tanya, I know they eat soup, but what kind? Tanya was now back in being completely frustrated. Tanya sighed before responding again. Tanya spoke in a slow, irritated tone. Yes, it's soup. But what kind of soup? Is it chicken noodle, ramen, tomato? Tanya's frustration suddenly hit its boiling point, and she yelled out, Tanya, soup! Just soup, are you mocking me? Tanya's brow was twitching in frustration. She spoke in an irritated tone as she responded. Tanya, I know you're at soup! Tanya suddenly realized that she was yelling in front of other soldiers and so tried to calm herself down. Tanya, but why are you at soup? Tanya was frustrated again, and she looked back at the soldier. Tanya, what do you mean you're at the soup store? Tanya paused before realizing that explains a lot. Tanya took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down. Tanya spoke in a calm tone. The enemies are at the soup store, and they're stealing soup? Tanya calmed down a bit after the soldier confirmed it. Tanya crossed her arms and spoke softly. And they're stealing soup. All right. Tanya looked a little intrigued as the soldier mentioned a brown-haired lady. She responded, her tone curious. Tanya, oh? Tanya remembered that Mary was brown-haired and spoke again. Tanya, who's the brown-haired lady? Tanya's hands slowly clenched into fists as the soldier confirmed that it was Mary. Tanya spoke in a serious tone, her eyes narrowed. Tanya, is Mary still in the soup store? Tanya's fury quickly began to grow in intensity. Her anger was returning in full force. She spoke in a furious tone. Tanya, bitch! Tanya suddenly realized she yelled bitch, and the soldiers were definitely hearing everything. Tanya quickly spoke up again. Tanya, ahem, excuse that little outburst. Tanya looked up at the soldiers that were staring at her. She awkwardly scratched her cheek as she spoke. Tanya, just ignore it. Tanya turned her head when Fan asked about her outburst. Tanya spoke in a slightly embarrassed tone. It's just that Mary really gets on my nerves. Tanya was a little surprised by Fan's response. The fact that he wanted to handle it himself really impressed her. Tanya smirked a bit, feeling very proud of Fan. Oh, honey, are you going to handle it? Tanya raised an eyebrow in curiosity as Fan mentioned that. She spoke in an intrigued tone. Tanya, big surprise? What kind of surprise? Tanya paused for a moment and then immediately smirked, realizing the plan. She spoke in a devious tone. Tanya, oh, you little devil. Tanya and the soldiers stood outside the soup store, watching and waiting for Mary to come out. When Mary finally came out, Tanya was grinning. The plan was going perfectly. Tanya's smirk only grew as Mary yelled out. She responded in a mocking tone. Oh, yeah? I'd like to see you try. Miss, I eat too much soup. Tanya could hear Fan and Victoria laugh and realized that they had probably been watching. Tanya couldn't help but chuckle a little herself as she responded in a teasing tone. Tanya, looks like you have an audience, Mary. Tanya smirked and folded her arms, taking a moment to look Mary up and down. Tanya spoke in a mocking tone. Tanya, oh, what, you think you have a good reputation? I doubt anyone thinks highly of a thief like you. Tanya continued to smirk as she spoke. Tanya, a reputation is a privilege that honest people have, and you're just an untrustworthy, selfish thief. Tanya and the soldiers watched Mary's selfish temper tantrum with clear satisfaction. Tanya spoke with mock concern in her tone as she spoke mockingly to Mary. Tanya, oh, is the little selfish thief throwing a fit? Tanya was a little surprised by Victoria's remark. Tanya looked at Victoria before looking back at Mary and responded, yeah, I think so, but clearly she's not behaving like one. Tanya responded while continuing to watch Mary, her expression amused. Tanya, no, it's pathetic that she's acting so childish. Tanya slowly turned to look at Fan when he spoke. She was a little curious, wondering what his question was. Tanya responded with a mildly inquisitive tone. Tanya, yes, honey, what's your question? Tanya was a little shocked by Fan's question. Tanya was aware that she looked much younger than what her actual age. Tanya stared at Fan for a moment before answering in a soft, quiet tone. Tanya, you see, Tanya hesitates for a moment before continuing. Tanya, it's due to the fact that my brain has a delayed development. Tanya's cheeks went pink as she realized the implications of Fan's question. Fan was essentially asking if she was a loli. Tanya tried her best to avoid looking at Fan as she responded. Tanya, yeah, I guess I am.